Hey guys, welcome to another video. So I know, so one of these days I'll say something other than, hey guys, welcome to another video. So I'm so excited about this. I know I say that every time, but I'm just really excited about sharing videos and art and things with all of you. And there's a growing number of you. Like every time I put out a video, there's more of you, and that's so exciting. And I think that today we're probably gonna hit 9,000 subscribers, which is incredible. And by the time this video will be up, my Winsor & Newton giveaway will be completed and the winners will have been contacted and all of that, which is like with weird video editing time travel. I actually haven't done that yet. I know who the winners are, but I haven't made that video, and by the time you see this, that video will already be up, so that's interesting. Anyway, sorry, getting distracted. We're painting eyes again. I really enjoyed the watercolor eyes that I did a little while ago, so I decided that I wanted to do some in gouache. And as I've said and continue to say every time I experiment with gouache, gouache frightens me, and sometimes we don't get along because I don't always know how to approach using it, and sometimes it goes really well and I'm able to kind of understand the medium a little bit more, and sometimes I just struggle the whole way and it doesn't turn out. And there was a bit of both in that. In this video, there will be a bit of both of those occurrences. And usually what happens is I think, oh, I haven't used gouache in a while, so I want to experiment with gouache. So that's what I did this time, and usually it starts really well. So this first eye I felt started really well and I was really happy with it. This first one's probably actually my favorite. And I also decided I wanted to put eyelashes on these because I don't usually do eyelashes, but I want to learn and get better at them, so I did it. And around the only one that I struggled with the most was actually the third eye. So you'll see the beginnings of my struggle. It's always the third one. Like even with the watercolor eyes, it was the third one. The first two go pretty easy, pretty nice and fun. And then for some reason I get to the third one and my brain just decides to betray me. And I curse its sudden but inevitable betrayal, and I'm just really sad. Anyway, gouache. I'm using gouache, guys. I have been putting together a gouache palette, and I will probably create a separate video to tell you about that palette and all the colors that are in it and how I put that together. And I had previously not really enjoyed working with reactivated gouache. Like with gouache, you can put it in a palette like you would with watercolors and let it dry out, and then just reactivate it as you would with watercolor paints. But I've found that gouache doesn't reactivate quite as smoothly and as completely as watercolors do, so nothing beats gouache straight out of the tube when it's fresh and juicy and wet. So sometimes I usually will use a bit of both. If there's a color that I know I'm going to want a lot of with gouache, then especially white, I use a lot of white. So oftentimes when I'm working with gouache, I will squeeze some white right out of the tube. Or if I'm working on a larger piece and I need to cover an entire background or something like that in one color, then that color will usually come right out of the tube. But for most of these, I was working with at least slightly dry gouache because I had, it wasn't that long since I had put these in my palette. So I'm using a couple different brands of gouache also. So my starter set, and the only gouache I had had up to this point mostly, was my tiny little 5 milliliter set of Holbein gouache, and I'll leave links to the sets and things like that in the description. And so I had that starter set from Holbein, and it was amazing. A great introductory way to try professional gouache and get started, and that was like $24 or so when I got it. So that was really nice. And I also had some cheap Marie's gouache. Now I didn't use any of that for this project, but I also recently invested in a couple tubes just of specific colors that I wanted of M-gram gouache. So I really like the M-gram watercolors, and I've heard really great things about the gouache. And one thing that I'm really excited about actually is that the M-gram gouache, similar to the watercolors because it's so honey-based, it doesn't really dry completely. So I've had my M-gram gouache in pans, like full pans or half pans, for at least a week, maybe 2 weeks now, and they're still juicy when I touch them. So it doesn't necessarily always rub off on my fingers, but sometimes it can stick to my fingers and it's still definitely kind of squishy and doesn't dry completely. Sometimes I get a little paranoid and I just go in and wet my gouache, even if I'm not planning on using it, because I don't want it to crack. I know I could add things like honey or glycerin when I first pour them out of the tube, and that would help them to not crack as much and to stay a bit more moist, but I've been a bit nervous about adding other things to my paints other than water, so I haven't tried that yet, but I probably will sometime, maybe in the future, possibly. So this was when things started to get a bit rough with the gouache, and I know exactly why it was happening with this eye. It was late at night, first of all. It was probably after midnight when I was working on this one. I had done the other two already, and then I was just continuing on with this one, and I didn't have very much contrast going on, so a lot of my values were really similar. At this point now, okay, yeah, here is now the next day. So now I was thinking about this eye while I was going to bed, and when I woke up in the morning, I was thinking about what I could do to fix it and bring it all together, and ultimately that just came with adding more contrast. So getting some darker values in there, and really defining more of the shadowy areas and adding a bit more variety. The first three had been pretty cool in color overall, lots of pinks and blues, and I wanted to take this last one in a completely different direction, and I decided to go with warmer colors. So I used a lot of yellow ochre and lots of reds and some orangey tones that I mixed up, and it was really fun. I've found that when working with gouache, especially when you dry it, if you re-wet it like at least 5 or 10 minutes ahead of time, I have like a little eyedropper that I use, and I drop a few drops of water into each of my pans and let it sit for a while. It's a lot easier than with watercolors. Often I will just them right as I'm ready to use them, which works pretty well with watercolors, but if you want a more opaque finish with gouache, it's better to give it some time before you start working with it, because otherwise gouache just tends to be a bit more of a frustrating experience for me. But these went really well, and I'm actually really excited to work with gouache some more. So I'm happy. I'm really happy with how these eyes turned out overall. So let me know which one is your favorite. Which one of these eyes do you like the best? And is there anything else in particular, like a specific subject matter, that you would like to see painted in gouache? Or maybe do you have any questions about how gouache is used or how it's different from watercolors? Let me know, and I can either answer those in a future video, or depending on the depth of the subject, I can just make an entire separate video about that specific topic. I'm really excited to experiment more with gouache and get to know the medium a bit better. Every step forward is a good one, even if the pieces don't always turn out the way I wanted. But thank you guys for watching this video, and I will see you on Monday. Bye!